Hello, my name is Angela Sanchez, and I will be presenting on the Indian Gaming Regulatory Act for my Business Law and Ethics class. I will be covering the following key points in this presentation. I will begin with a brief explanation of tribal sovereignty. I will identify some notable Supreme Court cases in relation to tribal sovereignty and also to which led to the Indian Gaming Regulatory Act. I will also go over the classifications of Indian gaming, the National Indian Gaming Association, which was commissioned as part of the Indian Gaming Regulatory Act. I will review the New Mexico Gaming Control Board, Responsible Gaming Association of New Mexico, and Gaming on the Musqueam Apache Tribe. A person of Native American descent occupies a unique legal position in the United States. They are a U.S. citizen, and they are entitled to the same legal rights and protections under the Constitution as other U.S. citizens enjoy. But they also are members of self-governing tribes, and these tribes predate the arrival of the European powers on the American shores. Each tribe has an inherent right to govern itself. Before European powers came along, tribes conducted their own affairs and were self-ruling. The U.S. has a substantial degree of recognizing tribal sovereignty, as the federal government does. Some important cases you see here are part of the Marshall Trilogy because they were all Supreme Court cases that were reviewed by our Chief Justice, or the U.S. Supreme Court Chief Justice, John Marshall. These three cases were notable in paving the way and defining what tribal sovereignty is and how it is practiced. They essentially mandated that private citizens could not purchase lands from Native Americans. They identified tribes as dependent nations, not independent foreign nations of the U.S., and they also gave the federal government sole authority to deal with Indian nations. Basically, the states could not pass laws without the consent. Basically, the state laws could not affect these Indian tribes. And currently, there is 567 federally recognized American Indian tribes in the United States. We have two notable Supreme Court cases. The first is Byron versus Itasca County, and this is notable in the way that it did establish that states do not have the right to assess a tax on the property of a Native American who is living on tribal land without authorization from Congress. And this was the decision was based on the Commerce Clause of the Constitution. The next is California versus Cabazon Band of Mission Indians, and this affirmed that gambling could not be regulated by states unless state law prohibited all forms of gambling. And many say this is what opened the door for Native American gaming industry as we know it. That ruling also led to the development of the Indian Gaming Regulatory Act of 1988 by the U.S. Congress. In it, the Indian tribes have the exclusive right to regulate gaming activity on federal lands if the gaming activity is not specifically prohibited by federal law and is conducted within a state which does not, as a matter of criminal law and public policy, prohibit such gaming. It provided statutory basis for the operation of gaming by tribes by promoting tribal economic development, self-sufficiency, and strong tribal governments. It also provided a statutory basis to shield these tribal gaming operations from organized crime and corrupting influences. Basically, it contended that tribes should be primary beneficiaries and that operations should be conducted fairly and honestly. It did lead to the establishment of the National Indian Gaming Commission and the classification of Indian gaming into 3 types. The first type is Class 1, and these are known as traditional Indian games. These are engaged by individuals as part of traditional ceremonies or celebrations, and these are exclusively regulated by the tribes. Class 2 would be your bingo, non-house banked card games authorized or not explicitly prohibited by the state, and these are regulated by the tribes with oversight from the National Indian Gaming Commission. The third is the Class 3, and this includes but not limited to baccarat, Cayman defer, blackjack, slot machine, electric or electromechanical facsimiles of any game of choice. And this is more like your casino-style gambling. Tribes must follow certain conditions with a Class 3. Here are the 3 conditions. First, this type of gaming must be permitted in the state with which the tribe is located. There must be a tribe and state negotiated compact that is approved by the Secretary of Interior, or the Secretary must have approved regulatory procedures. There also needs to be an adoption of tribal gaming ordinance that has been approved by the Chairman of the National Indian Gaming Commission. And it is basically, it is Congress's intent for tribal state compacts to define and regulate issues beyond that. And it also vested the Indian Gaming Commission with broad authority to play a key role in the gaming regulations. The Indian Gaming Commission was established by Congress pursuant to the Indian Gaming Regulatory Act. This is a federal regulatory agency within the Department of Interior, and it regulates Indian gaming. It works closely with the Department of Justice and the Department of Interior. There's 3 seats on this commission board. The first is the chair, and this is appointed by the President and confirmed by the U.S. Senate. And then we have 2 commissioners that are appointed by the Secretary of Interior. 2 of the 3 must be enrolled members of a federally recognized tribe, and also another fact is that 2 members, no more than 2 members can be of the same political party. The responsibilities of the National Indian Gaming Commission is to regulate and monitor certain aspects of Indian gaming. They coordinate regulatory responsibilities with the tribal regulatory agencies. They provide training and technical assistance to the tribal regulatory agencies. They review and approve tribal gaming ordinances and management agreements. They review backgrounds of individuals and entities to ensure the stability of those seeking to manage or invest in Indian gaming, and this is pretty much like keeping corrupt practices from coming into the gaming operations. They oversee and review the conduct and regulation of Indian gaming operations. They enforce violations against the Indian Gaming Regulatory Act, and then they refer law enforcement matters to appropriate tribal, federal, and state entities. Here you will see a map of Indian gaming locations in the United States, and they are also color coordinated to the regions that they report to. There is the Commission oversees 472 tribally owned and operated or licensed gaming establishments. Next, I will touch on the New Mexico Gaming Control Board. It was established by statutes in 1997 and funded during the 1998 legislative session. They regulate legalized gaming in New Mexico's licensed racetracks, veteran and fraternal organizations, investigate and enforce violations of laws and regulations that prohibit illegal gambling activities, and they monitor New Mexico tribal gaming compacts through the appointment of state gaming representatives. The board members are appointed by the government with advice and consent of the New Mexico State Senate. The purpose and objective is to regulate the state and tribe in making compacts and to address the state's interest in establishment by the tribes. They oversee revenue sharing and regulatory fees. They provide effective agency government-to-government interaction and responsible gaming. Here you will see important dates in relation to the New Mexico Indian gaming. In 1988, we do have the Indian Gaming Regulatory Act that is established by the Congress. In 1990, we see our first task force commissioned by Governor Bruce King to negotiate gaming compacts with the Pueblo of Sandia and Musqueam Apache tribe. In 1991, this task force presents a negotiated Class 3 gaming compact, which has been refused by Governor King. In 1994, we see Gary Johnson defeats Governor King, and this is notable as that Gary Johnson was pro about Indian gaming. Through 1995 through 1997, there's continuing negotiations of compacts. In 1999, the New Mexico State Legislature adopts the Compact Negotiation Act. In 2001, new gaming compacts are negotiated and approved by the New Mexico State Legislature and all signed, with the exception of Musqueam Apache tribe and the Pueblo of Milwaukee. Finally, in 2004, you do see that Musqueam Apache tribe settles their disputes with the state of New Mexico and enter into a 2001 gaming compact. As part of the gaming compact, we pay a revenue share. The revenue share that is paid is based on reported net win. Net win is the amount waged on gaming machines less the amount paid out in cash and non-cash prizes won on the gaming machine. This is not net profit at the casino, but as you can see at the end of the quarter of September 30th, 2017, the combined 13 New Mexico tribes who have gaming operations did pay the state treasurer for revenue sharing that was deposited into the general fund of the state of New Mexico over $15 million. These revenue sharings are paid out in a quarterly interval. I did take the 4 quarterly reports of 2017, and you can see that over $59 million was paid to the state treasurer for revenue sharing deposited into the general fund of the state of New Mexico by the 14 New Mexico tribes. Here you will see a map of the 14 New Mexico tribal gaming operations that we have in the state of New Mexico. As far as responsible gaming, there is a Responsible Gaming Association of New Mexico. They are part of their existence is part of the state compact. They provide educational material for those who seek information about problem gambling. They fund treatment and counseling services to families, employers, and communities. They do provide resources such as self-testing, videos about problem gambling, information on self-exclusion at casinos, which is basically self-bans, and counseling services. They do have a 1-800 helpline that is accessible 24 hours, 7 days a week, and it is confidential. Here you will see a list of tribal casino operations that do participate in the responsible gaming programs. As one of the regulations, as part of the tribal compact and the responsible gaming aspect of it, all tribal casino employees are required to take an annual class in recognizing problem gambling behaviors, and they are trained to identify these problem gamblers and report them to the appropriate casino employees so that they may be offered information and assistance for help. The tribal regulatory agency here on the Musqueam tribe is known as the Musqueam Apache Tribal Gaming Commission. It is the independent gaming regulatory agency. It reports directly to the tribal government. There is no reporting relationship that they have with the casino or its management. It was established by tribal ordinance, and it is held to the highest standards of integrity, honesty, in gaming activities. Their primary responsibilities is to ensure the integrity of the games, protects tribal assets, and enforces compliance with regulations and laws. We do have a Mescalero Responsible Gaming Program, which was established in 2003. As mentioned before, we are required by Gaming Compact to help fund supportive programs for compulsive gambling in New Mexico. This is it cannot be no less than 1/4% of its adjusted slot revenues. Mescalero chooses to also offer their own program, and these services are provided to all who patronize the casino. The Gaming Compact does require that all casinos in New Mexico post signages about responsible gaming and the statewide exclusion program. They also are to post signages of the 1-800 helpline also. In conclusion, the Indian Gaming Regulatory Act remains to be a controversial act, especially in its relation to violations of the tribal sovereignty. But I can see how it provides regulation and some protections of the gaming operation. Here on the Mescalero tribe, we have seen revenues help in our pay for our tribal government operations and also in the renovation of our resort here on the Mescalero Apache tribe. It has helped in ways of funding college scholarship programs for tribal members based on their needs. I feel that this organization has also, the Mescalero Apache Gaming Organization has worked to promote good relationships with surrounding communities by providing funding for community services and job opportunities to tribal members and the surrounding communities.